Okay, we're going to get started now. My name is Laurel Ackerman. I'm on the AtScale marketing team, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar covering AtScale and Tableau, analyzing big data in Tableau at the speed of thought. First, a couple housekeeping items. Today's webinar will run for about 45 minutes, so we can leave some time for Q&A at the end. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll address them at the end. And the recording will be available after this live event is over. We'll send an email with a link to it out to all of you, to everyone who's registered, and you'll also be able to find it on our website at atscale.com. All right, now let's get started. Our presenter today is AtScale's founder and chief strategy officer, Dave Mariani. Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Laurel. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. So what I'm going to take you through today is a few slides just to set up what our solution is and how it works and how it's architected. And then we'll spend a lot of time showing you just how much we can make Tableau even better than Tableau by itself. So let's get started. I'll spend most of the time actually demoing the software. So let's just get first some background here. So what is an adaptive analytics fabric? Well, what you can see that we can do is that we can be your connector. We can be your single semantic layer for any of your data platforms, whether they be data platforms on premise like your Hadoop or Teradata or Oracle, whether they be cloud data warehouses like Snowflake. And BigQuery and Redshift, or even other SaaS platforms. We're the one connection point where your users can go to get access to that data in one single governed and secure fashion. So I'll show you how we do that today. In today's demo, I'm actually going to be showing you how we're going to be blending data from in the cloud. So the demo will be against Snowflake. And we'll actually be blending data with an on-prem data warehouse in Teradata. So we'll be able to show you how in one interface, we'll be able to combine data from two different platforms, one in the cloud and one on-prem. So AtScale has a number of top customers, household brands here. What we do is really help those customers really modernize their analytics infrastructure. And that means that we can move them from a data warehouse to a data lake, or we can move them from a on-prem data warehouse to a cloud data warehouse in AWS, Google, or Azure. So what I'll show you today is exactly how we can do that and how we can do that all seamlessly without moving data. Some of the things that the AtScale platform can address. If you're like me, you've heard a lot of these kind of complaints from your user base. I'm sure things are too slow. It takes too long to get data to your users because you have to do a bunch of data movement and ETL and the like. Moving to the cloud is scary. And there's cost concerns, security concerns. How do we make that more seamless and less scary? I always hear about scaling issues. Data keeps growing. We keep on capturing and wanting to put to use more and more data. And our data platforms that were born in the 90s just really can't do that without some help. We also hear a lot about, and I had this difficulty of this issue when I was at Yahoo, which is I want a single source of truth. Everybody is basically spinning their own stories, often starting with the same data, and there's no way to really ensure that everybody's speaking the same language. And then there's just the complexity of having to manage multiple data platforms and multiple tools, whether they be BI tools, Excel, or even ML and AI tools. So what AtScale can do for you, especially if you're looking to move to the cloud, is that we can make platforms like Snowflake and BigQuery and Redshift even better. And we can do that by speeding up queries by over 60 times. We can lower your compute cost by up to 10 times and make the interface much easier to use in terms of consuming data in the cloud. So these numbers are all from our cloud data warehouse benchmark study that we just released. So if you want to learn more about the details, please go to our website and download. So where does AtScale fit in the overall, this new analytics stack? And this is what we see a lot of our customers doing, is that when they move to the cloud, they're landing all their data on the file system, whether that be S3, if it's in Amazon, it's the Google Cloud Platform, that would be Google Cloud Storage, or ADLS for Azure. By landing all your files there, what we then see customers doing is, some of those customers want to access those files directly as is, but most of them actually go through some kind of a data pipeline and then load those into a data warehouse engine in the cloud, like BigQuery, Snowflake, or Redshift. Alongside is that we have the cataloging tools, tools like Elation, like Calibra, and Waterline. And those tools are really meant to catalog your data assets as well as set policies for accessing those assets. The one thing that most customers are missing in this picture is this semantic and governance engine, and that's really where AtScale fits. So by becoming that sort of gateway to all your data, not just the data in your data warehouse, but also the data in your data lake, and making it all governed, making it all perform like you need it to perform for doing BI and AI, and also enforcing those policies defined by the data catalogs. So not just defining and the workflow for defining those policies, but enforcing those policies for every single query. So how does AtScale do that? How do we make that work? So let me explode out this box for you, and it'll show you here. So with the AtScale platform, what we do is that we actually create a single API or endpoint for your BI tools, regardless of what they are, or your custom applications. And those custom applications or tools can speak SQL if they're talking tabular mode. They can also speak OLAP if they're looking for tools like Excel that you want to do pivot tables with. Or if you want to do application integration, you can even use a RESTful interface. And what you get here is a full scale out multi-dimensional engine. It's excellent for scaling up your traditional OLAP engines like SQL Server Analysis Services. We can replace that and scale that up. There's also a federated query engine. So that means we can combine data from any data platforms that we support. And you can see a wide range down here, including data platforms that are on-prem and in the cloud. And we're going to make that really, really fast with our performance, our acceleration structures. We'll automatically tune performance by creating aggregations in the most appropriate location possible, so that every query uses the least amount of data and returns results in the fastest way possible. Security is really important here, and this is where the governance comes into play. And I'm hoping I can show you that in the product in detail. So how is it that we specifically make Tableau even better? Well, first of all, we're going to reduce and actually eliminate your data latency. So how do we reduce or eliminate data latency? Well, we're going to be connecting today with Tableau to AtScale in a live connection. So no extract mode. That means by working with live data, as soon as that live data is updated in whatever system, whether it be a data warehouse or a data lake, you have the latest data and you have all that data. We also, by not pre-aggregating the data, we get to maintain that data fidelity. So if you need to go all the way down to a SKU, to investigate a problem, you need to look at a claim, you can do that because the detail and the atomic data is not aggregated away. So AtScale will give you full view of all your data. AtScale can also help lower the operational and complexity associated with Tableau when it comes to feeding Tableau. So instead of moving data into extracts, instead of creating a bunch of aggregations and separate data marts, with AtScale, you can do that all virtually without any data movement. Tableau is a great tool, and I love it. It's my favorite, but it makes it even better if you can do full OLAP, but do full OLAP with all the capabilities that Tableau gives you through SQL mode. So we have a very unique way of introducing OLAP to Tableau, but without losing that SQL tabular interface that makes Tableau so powerful. We increase scale and concurrency by orders of magnitude. You saw that in some of the in the benchmark results. We're talking about increasing query speeds by 60 times or more, and reducing cost by 10 times or more. And then there's the agility. What I'm going to show you today is how we can very quickly go from raw data to data that's consumable in Tableau. I'll also show you Power BI and Excel, and it'll all be done through one single semantic layer. Everybody gets the same answers, gets governed the same, regardless of the tool they're using, especially Tableau. So for today's demo, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take it's a two-step process for defining what we call a virtual cube in AtScale. So we're going to define that virtual cube. We're going to act, and I'm going to act as a data owner to define these virtual views that then will then consume using our BI tools, starting and spending most of the time in Tableau, but then I'll go show you how we can consume that same virtual cube in Excel and Power BI. Okay. So it's no good to show you how we do it in AtScale until we actually show you what you probably do today with Tableau. So like I mentioned in my intro, today we have data in Snowflake as well as Teradata. So so how am I going to connect to that through Tableau? Well, in Tableau, what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm just going to have to log into one data source. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my Snowflake instance here, and I'll put in my password and sign in. So this is the way that you would access data in Snowflake. So I'm going to select my Snowflake warehouse. I'm going to select my database in Snowflake. And then I'm going to select the schema that I want to deal with. And so here's all my data. So what we're going to have to do now is like all this data to me is really gobbledygook. There's a bunch of redundant data here. You can see we have fact internet sales multiple times. And to actually do this, I'm going to have to pull this off into my canvas. And then I'm going to have to start doing joins and modeling all by myself. So forcing your Tableau users to actually remodel data every time is really a heavy lift. And we're not going to do that now. We're going to separate that role where we're going to use AtScale Design Center to create a model very quickly so that a Tableau user won't have to remodel their data every time. And especially, I don't know how I even deal with the fact that I have some of my data in Teradata. I would have to define two different connections and use Tableau's data blending feature, which is not going to work on a large-scale data warehouse like Tableau and Snowflake. Okay, so that's how we would do it in Tableau without AtScale. So let's go ahead and now do it with AtScale. So this is AtScale Design Center. So I'll give you a little tour first and some background on some of our terminology. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to define and build a model for a retail sales shop. So first of all, what do I see here? And this is what we call the canvas over here on the left-hand side. These are our data assets. So these are tables. You can see the greens are dimensions. Dimensions are just made up of data sets, which are tables and based on tables or files in your data lake. So you also might notice is that there is some icons here, and you can see that there's a snowflake icon here. That's connected to a Snowflake data warehouse. But you can see that my order dimension is actually, and my product dimension are actually coming from my Teradata data warehouse. So with AtScale, I can go ahead and create that unified view without having to move data to one warehouse or the other. What you see on the right is that you see that you have our metadata. This is what the BI tool, this is what Tableau is going to see. They're going to see product attributes where I have a product hierarchy. They're going to see metrics and sales metrics like order quantity and the like. Okay, so that's the finished cube. Let's go and let's actually build a new cube from scratch by going to my interface here and clicking on new cube. And I'm going to call this new cube webinar December. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new cube. And there's my webinar December virtual cube. So now I'm on the canvas here, and you can see I have no measures and dimensions yet, and I have no assets on my canvas. What I can do now is I can go to my data sources, and what you see in my data sources, you see that I have my Snowflake data warehouse as well as my Teradata data warehouse. And on these data warehouses and are automatically, there's no loading of the data, there's no describing it. All I had to do was to make these to appear in the interface is I had to go back to my settings, and in my data warehouses, you can see I have my Snowflake and Teradata warehouse here. And all you have to do is just input your credentials, in this case, for Snowflake. And I can create a new data warehouse just by clicking on this button here, choosing the data warehouse type and adding the credentials. Doing that means that I can now go ahead and create those cubes like you saw I was about to do with those data sources. Okay, so back to our canvas. So let's go ahead and let's go and pull on some data. I'm going to be using a sales log table. The sales log table, happens to be from Snowflake. This is stored in Snowflake. And it has a bunch of my sales data. So this is all my sales transactions. So what I've just done now by bringing this on the canvas is I've created a data set. And what I can now do is I can see all the columns in that table, but I can also just double click it and bring up our data set composer, which allows me to see a preview of the data. So here's the raw data, as well as add transformations or new calculations. So let's do that. First of all, let's just take a look here. I got my product info as a string field. It's key value pairs. So there's some nested data here. And Snowflake does a wonderful job with variants that makes it really powerful to be able to include JSON. So we can view that there. You can also see I have like sales reasons, and I have some nulls as well as some data. If I want to clean that data up without having to actually do any kind of ETL, I can just go ahead and say replace my nulls with -1, for example, and I can do a preview there. And if I like the results, I can go ahead and save that as a virtual column, and that column is now available for modeling. So that's how we can actually do transformations without having to actually physically create new data structures. I can also create virtual columns. So let's add a new column here to my data set. We'll call it sales tax. And I can create a calculation like sales amount. I'll multiply it times 8.5%. That is a query, that formula, which could be anything, could be if statements, case statements, It could be regexes to explode out nested fields. It could also be, it could also be calling a UDF that you've built, a user-defined function that you built in your data warehouse. By doing that and just saving that, that now becomes a new column that I can now model in my virtual cube. So there you see the calculation for sales tax. So if I go back to my canvas view here and I scroll down, there you see the sales tax has been added. So to add it to my virtual cube, I just pop it in this pane here. And now what you see is that sales tax is my first measure in my virtual cube. So let's add some other measures. I'm going to want to add up my order quantities to see how much my users or my customers have purchased. I want to see what the total sales amount is, so I'll add that. I might want to also count the unique customers that are coming to my website. So I can actually create a distinct count here. This time what I'll do is I'll override our aggregation type that we've been defaulting to a distinct count estimate. So now I have distinct customers that I've been counting. So there's what it looks like. It's going to look like to my Tableau users. Nice, easy to read and understand. And the Tableau user doesn't need to know where this data came from. Okay, what about some dimensions? Let's add some dimensions to this model. I'm going to go to my library. In my library, we have data sets and dimensions. And I'm going to pull off some existing dimensions here. I'll show you how I can create these dimensions later on. So let's pull on the product dimension, the date dimension, and let's do the customer dimension. So these are now on our canvas. And if you look at it, you can see that there's hierarchies that have been exposed. You can see in my date dimensions case that there's a bunch of different roll-ups for retail 445, custom 445, or just straight roll-ups between months and weeks. So with AtScale, we have the time intelligence. That's one of the beauties of the OLAP model, which means that you define it once server side, and everybody's going to get to take advantage of very complicated date arithmetic, all built in and done server side. So how do I use these? I simply wire them up. So I'm going to take my, let's do product first. I'm going to take my product key and I'm going to attach it to that product dimension. Now look what I just did here. If I come over to my dimensions, what you can see is that the product dimension has now been added, and it fully lifted that hierarchy that I just dropped it on. I could do the same thing with the customer. So let's look at my customer key here and drop that. Now watch what happens over here. Now you see I have my customer attributes folder, and you can see I have geography added in addition to my customer name and customer attributes. So why did that happen? If I double click on this customer dimension, you can see that the customer dimension actually has itself its own model. And you can see that there's two more dimensions linked to this, a gender dimension and a geography dimension. So we can continue sort of to peel back the layers here, and you can see that the geography dimension is made up of this kind of a model. So with AtScale, I can keep things very simple and very high level, but allow these to be conformed dimensions and to be relatively complex without exposing that complexity to the model builder. What about my dates? I got my order date keys. I'm going to give it a prefix of order. And then voila, you're going to see I did a role-playing dimension. So there's my date. You can see now there's order date hierarchy. I can do the same thing with ship. And you can see if I add a prefix, I now have my ship date as well as order date. So there we go. Okay. What about some new dimensions? Well, creating new dimensions in AtScale is super simple. And so let's go back to that, to our raw data here, and let's actually build a dimension on the fly off of some nested data. So remember we have our product info data here. We have size, weight, style, color. Well, let's go in AtScale, because AtScale understands that structure. I can simply click on that column, type in the key, because we recognize it as a key value pair, and add 2 virtual columns for color and style. And now I can go ahead and drop those into my dimension box, and voila, now I have dimensions for color and for style. And I didn't have to create a dimension table. I didn't have to create a star schema. I did that straight off of the raw sales log table on a nested field. Okay, so that's good enough. Let's go ahead and let's explore this data now so we can see what it looks like to a Tableau user. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this now. So when I publish this, that means in AtScale speak that it's now available for querying. So now you can see that my webinar December virtual cube has been published, and I can go ahead and here, just go ahead and connect to it by opening up Tableau, because we actually automatically create a Tableau data source. So all that information and all that metadata is now going to be available to every Tableau user. So I'm logging into AtScale now, and there's my virtual cube. There's my customer attributes, there's all my data attributes, my products, as well as all those metrics or measures that I added that you saw me add. So let's go back to the data source and let's contrast this to what you saw previously when I was using Snowflake using Tableau against Snowflake directly. Well, first of all, you can see we have a live connection, and you can see that there's our webinar December virtual cube. It shows up in Tableau as just a single entity. So I'm not doing any modeling now. All I need to do is just use this data by go ahead and running some queries. I just added order quantity, and I can go order quantity by color. So remember, color was that key value pair. That was that nested data field. So rather than breaking that out with ETL into a columnar fashion, I just unfolded that data on the fly with a live query. So let's go and let's look at order quantity, and let's look at order quantity by my product hierarchy, by product name, and let's run that query. Oh wait, I just forgot something very important. When I was actually defining this new virtual cube, and I defined that new that product dimension. That product dimension was actually in Teradata. There you see it. So what I just did here in Tableau is I just ran a federated query. So what it did is it joined data from Snowflake with a dimension, the product dimension, which was actually in Teradata. And it did all that without the user ever having to know anything happened. The data arithmetic, remember I got all my data attributes. So all the time relative, like doing month to dates and year over year, all that comes for free. And all that comes and is done server side. So your users and your Tableau users don't have to actually create all that complicated arithmetic within Tableau. Okay, so we just were running some queries now. Let's go take a look and see what happened behind the scenes in that model. So I'm going to go back to AtScale and show you exactly what AtScale is doing behind the scenes. So what I just did here is I could see some queries I just ran. And let's look at this query. Well, let's look at that query I ran in color. So here is the query that we intercepted from Tableau. So Tableau thinks that there's a single table called webinar December. And then what we ended up doing is we ended up breaking out that query for the user. We ran that one query that was doing a federation. So for there's our product name. Remember, product is now, you can see that if I look at the query, you can see that we accessed the data and ran a query in Teradata, and we ran a query in Snowflake, and then we put it together. So that federated query took actually 15 seconds. That's way too long for customers to wait. So let's come back to this and then hit refresh really quickly on that federated query, and let me show you what happens. So trust me that that refreshed. So let's go back to our queries. Let me refresh this. And you can see that that query now, that product name query, actually ran in under a second, 754 milliseconds. So why was it so fast the second time? Well, because what we did is we actually created an acceleration structure, an aggregate, and we created that in our Snowflake data warehouse. So AtScale automated all that data engineering to make that federated use case much faster, and without you having to move data, or the customer or your customer, the Tableau user, having to know where that data was coming from. All right, well, let's take a look at something else. Let's take a look at, this is great. Tableau works the way I expect it to work without having to manually model or remodel the data. So I got my colors here, so I'm able to unnest data, so I'm able to modernize how I actually do data and analytics on today's data types. Well, let's see what happens in Excel, and let's see what happens in Power BI. So let's go and let's look at that. I'm on my Windows machine now, and let's open up Tableau, or sorry, open up Excel and see how AtScale can work with Excel. Well, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Data tab, and I can get external data from Analysis Services. So of course, we're not getting it from Analysis Services. We're actually getting it from AtScale. But we're able to use that Analysis Services built-in driver. So you can see here, we're accessing that AtScale instance, and I'm able to log in and see there's my webinar December virtual cube, and it now appears as a physical analysis services cube within Excel. So now I can go ahead and create a live pivot chart. So we're not importing data into Excel here. We're running a live query against an order quantity and color in this case. So what you see here is you can see that I have the same exact result in Excel that I did in Tableau. Well, what about Power BI? A lot of people are using Power BI these days. And so I can do the same thing with Power BI. Is I can go ahead and just click on that Get Data tab, choose the AtScale built-in connector, which comes with every edition of Power BI. I can go ahead and connect to that. So I'm connecting now live by just connecting to that same endpoint that we give, and I'm going to do direct query, so I'm not going to import the data. So I'm going to have live queries that I can now run through Power BI, just like I did Excel, just like I did Tableau. So here is my server. I can go ahead and open up, and I can see there's my webinar December. I can go ahead and click on that. It's going to give me my metadata, and I'm going to be able to run a live query and then publish that to the server if I like, and run that in Power BI. Okay, so let's go back here now that we've seen sort of a full cycle here. Let's see how easy it is to actually update data. So you remember when I was talking about in our presentation, I was talking about some of the things that we do for Tableau. What you saw there, you definitely saw that we reduced our data latency because we connected live to the data. You saw that we were running against live queries against both Snowflake and Teradata in this case. You saw that we were able to actually avoid any kind of extra ETL, especially when we exploded out that color dimension. You can see how we did OLAP through all the different date arithmetic and date hierarchies that we exposed. And you can see that, well, I can show you the numbers for scale and concurrency based on our benchmark. But you can see how fast it was to actually query those data structures. Well, what about our agility and our ability to make changes quickly? Let's go back to Design Center here. And let's go and click on our webinar December virtual cube again. And let's add a new dimension to it. So let's go and add to that same nested field. Let's go and add a new field for size of product. I'll add size. So you can see now size is now a virtual column. I'll add it as a dimension. And I'll go ahead and republish my virtual cube. And like that, I can just go to my Tableau here again. And you see I have color and style. I can hit the refresh button here and watch what happens. Instantly, size is now a new dimension in my virtual cube. So now I just ran a live query against and have results. I excluded my nulls for color and size of product distribution. As simple as that. So this is where the agility comes in. Because we virtualized it, because we have one single semantic layer that we've defined server side, we're now able to make those changes and make those changes in virtual without having to redeploy, without having to run ETL, change jobs, write code, and build physical cubes. We've done all that on the fly. So what about if I want to actually integrate with just an application and not use a BI tool at all? Well, let's go back to my query screen here and look at my user queries. And what you'll see here is, well, first of all, I ran that one query through. That's the query I just ran in Tableau. But let's just say I want to run this same query in my application. I can go ahead. I'm going to take that actual query, and I'm going to go into my tool, DB Visualizer. This is just a little tool that works through JDBC. I'm going to paste in that query that I just captured, and I can run that query, and voila, there you see the results in my application. In this case, I'm using DB Visualizer. So with AtScale, you got a single semantic layer. You can talk MDX, you can talk SQL for any of your BI tools, as well as applications, and get all your data in one place. Okay, so Laurel, I'm gonna hand it back to you and see if there's any questions in the audience that we can explore.
Great, thanks, Dave. Yes, we actually had a really interesting one that might take a few minutes to cover, but we have been speaking to a number of healthcare companies over time, so I think this should be interesting. The question is, what security is in place for healthcare and HIPAA concerns? And I think this is something, yeah, that you can demonstrate.
Okay, so let's, that's a good one. I didn't cover that in my demo. So again, like coming back to this picture here, remember we're sort of the man in the middle here. So these queries are coming through the AtScale layer, which gives us the opportunity to perform and add not just this on top of, or add to the security that you already have in your data warehouse or in your data lake, but we can also add additional security controls. So so Laurel, thanks for that. Let's go and let me show you how we can do that in a couple different circumstances, a couple different types. Well, first of all, you can see that there's a security tab here. And so we have users and groups and roles and assignments, and those all can be synced with your LDAP or Active Directory configurations. So all those are, so we're not going to recreate the wheel here. We're going to create and get all your users from your directory and your single sign-on technology within your company. You can see I have I've been using admin. I'm going to be using these user A Docker and user B Dockers. They're bad names, they're testing names, but we'll be using these for this demonstration. So let's come back to my cube here and my project and get back into our webinar December. So there's a couple different things I can do here in this model when it comes to security. The first thing is let's talk about row level security. So let's talk about the fact that let's do a scenario where only certain users can see different regions and sales from different regions. So how would I do that? I'm going to go into my customer dimension, and in my customer dimension, you can see I have a geography dimension. I'm going to drill a little bit more into that geography dimension. And you can see I have country. With AtScale, we have this concept that we call security dimensions. So just by taking a table, I'm going to pull this onto my canvas. And let's go and take a look at what is in this security dimension. It's just a dimension that's based on this user country map. So if I look at that data here, here's my user A Docker and user B Docker. User A Docker can see France, Australia, and Germany and the United Kingdom. My user B Docker can only see the United States. So just to show you right now, I'm logged in as admin. So if I come to do order quantity, let's go to that customer here, and let's look at my geography city and by country. You can see if I run this query right now, as admin, I see all my countries. So I see all my data from my countries. So what happens if we apply that security dimension in this model? Well, all I need to do to make this happen is take this country field and link it up to that security dimension. And now wherever this is going to be applied as a filter to every single query. So hold that thought, and let's add one other layer of security. And this layer is what we call perspectives. So you remember with my preview here, you can see all my dimensions and my measures, and you can see that my customer attributes have some PII in them. Last name, first name of the customer, and the customer full name. Let's create what we call a perspective to hide that PII information from users or from certain users who shouldn't be able to see that. I can go ahead and add this new perspective, and I'm going to call it no PII. So you can see our virtual cube here that we've defined, and I can go and simply say, you know, on that customer hierarchy, I don't want you to see that customer name, and I don't want you to see the last name and the first name. That is now going to create a perspective, no PII, that I can now actually preview and see here on my canvas. So, so if I look at that, I could see my no PII cube here. And if I look at my dimensions, you can see that I no longer see that PII data. Okay, so I can, in addition to that, now that I have that no PII perspective, you can see here on these perspectives, I can then apply additional security and access rights with my different users. And the like. So I can say for my user A Docker, allow them to discover and query that perspective. So now that's available to me. Okay, so by simply republishing that perspective as well as that security dimension that filters on country are now available for query. So let's go, and this time, let's go and connect to that no PII cube and see what the difference is here. So remember, that was like that's going to appear as another virtual cube to my users, even though that's just a perspective, which is just a security filter on top of it. So you can see that there's no PII in that customer dimension anymore. And actually what I should have done is I actually should have logged in as not as of admin. So let me re-log in to my no PII cube. This time I'm going to log in as user A Docker with my password and log into that perspective. Okay, again, I don't see any of that information. Let's go and let's run a query against order quantity. And then let's go look at let's go look at country. So let's look at that geography code and look at country. And what you see here is that user A Docker only has access to countries outside of North America versus my admin who has access to all the data. So that's an example of how we can actually perform, and really you can create any kind of security dimensions or any kind of constructs for pretty much anything, and those will be covered across all the different connections in the cube. So regardless of the dimension that I'm working with here, that filter will be applied consistently across all the data. And not only in Tableau, but also Power BI and Excel, and any custom application, you're all covered because of that fact that we have that one single entry point that will control access to all your data. So I think that's a pretty good deep view of security. There's so much more we could show, but and for that I would say contact us at AtScale.com. We'd love to show you more on that. So Laurel, back to you.
Great, thank you, Dave. Yeah, that is all the time that we have today. There were some questions that we didn't have time to answer today. I am keeping track of them. I'm going to make sure that they get passed to the right people at AtScale. Some of you are already talking to them so that we can address them one-on-one, get the information you're looking for out to you. But again, Dave, thank you so much for this great walkthrough. We will be sending out a link to the recording probably tomorrow morning when it's available. So I'm going to thank everybody for joining today. We'll see you next time.